Hey there, fellow comic collectors. I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm really excited to be bringing to you a special interview with artist Ryan Mendoza about the variant covers he did for my comic book, Cthulhu vs. Uncle Sam, which is currently live on Kickstarter right now. I'm going to have the links down below. I'm also going to have the links to Miskatonic High because, of course, Ryan is the regular artist on the wildly popular Kickstarter comic book series Miskatonic High. And so in this interview, we're going to, again, talk a lot about Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, the process that went into creating the variant covers that he did for this. But we're also going to be talking about Miskatonic High, something that I'm really excited to get into. It's a great series, and I was so excited to have Ryan come on board. He basically did one cover, but there's two different versions of it that you can get in the Kickstarter. One with the throwback logo as that says Adventures in the Unknown. It's an homage to the first horror series in comics. But if you don't want one with the logo, there's also a Virgin variant. These are both limited. The Adventures in the Unknown is only going to have 250 printed, and the Virgin variant is only going to have 50 copies printed. So if you want to get those, check it out down below. But now, without further ado, let's talk to Ryan about his art, about Cthulhu vs. Uncle Sam, and about Miskatonic High. I'm really excited to bring this to you, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, I'm very excited today. I'm joined by special guest Ryan Mendoza. Ryan's a comic book artist. You may know his work on Kickstarter from Miskatonic High. I happen to have an issue of it right here in my hand. And Ryan, I'm very excited. He has joined me for doing a special variant cover for my comic Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam. This is not the variant cover that he's drawn, but I'll be showing that in a little bit. This is the wrestling poster variant that I did for the book. And of course, that Kickstarter started on the 20th of June. It's running till the end of July. And so I was really excited that Ryan agreed to do this variant cover for me. Ryan, thanks very much for joining me. Why don't you just tell us a little about yourself?
Hey, thanks, Scott. I'm the artist for Miskatonic High. I've been doing this with Mike, the writer, Mike Shea. We've been doing this for like over 2 years now. And we're up to, we have a campaign currently now. I think we're going to end later. It's up on Kickstarter right now. It's issue 11, I think. Yeah. So yeah, busy with drawing tentacles and high school kids.
But you know, as I just showed, that I have an issue of Miskatonic High. I have some of the other ones digitally. I think this is the only one that I have a physical copy of. But of course, I was drawn to in my series, the Crime Busters. There's a lot of overlap. Mine's college students, and the Cthulhu elements are there. They're a little bit toned down. Mm-hmm. It takes place in the 50s, but there's a lot of similarities. So when I saw Miskatonic High, you know, I got really excited, and we've been fortunate enough. We did a little bit of cross promotion at one point when one of my issues only come out like twice a year at most. So Miskatonic High has a much more robust production schedule than Crime Busters. But I was particularly excited that you agreed to do the Uncle Sam Cthulhu cover because I'm a big fan of your art on Miskatonic High.
Thank you. Well, yeah. When I saw the image for Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, it really resonated with me because that's the type of comic books that I really like. You know, the pulp kind of action comics that was big around the 40s or 50s, I think. So yeah, it was really fun to work on that actually.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. You know, I had a lot of fun working with Jay Piscopo, who's the regular artist who did the interior and the regular cover. And yeah,
awesome.
He and I met through a Facebook group, which just is basically people who are fans of public domain golden age superheroes.
Yeah.
That's what he's known for doing. So I'm curious, how did you, when and how did you first get into comics?
Well, I think I started joining this DeviantArt. You know DeviantArt, right? It was popular a few years ago. I think it still is today. And I just posted some of my work there, and then tried to get a job in comics. I've always wanted to draw comics, and I thought, you know, just give it a shot. And that's when I met Mike Shea. We worked on a fan comic. It's a, it's not released or anything, but we worked on it, and it lasted for like over a year. And that's how we came up with our style, concepts. And then eventually we started talking about making our own series. And that's how we came up with Miskatonic High.
I'm curious, you mentioned you just did the Kickstarter for issue 11, and I've been really impressed as someone who uses, I do Kickstarter for my own books, just how regularly you're putting it out and using Kickstarter almost like as an alternative to regular distribution, but putting out those issues just constantly. How has that experience been for you using Kickstarter and connecting directly with the fans that way through Kickstarter?
Yeah, well, it did actually start that way. We just started with one issue, not even thinking ahead of how we will distribute the comic. We were thinking like maybe we could get a publisher or something, and then we'll go from there. And then as months went by, we didn't really get any call from any publisher. So we just continued making more issues since we were just having a ball making the series. And we already had a plan for like the whole season, basically issues 1 to 6. And that was when Mike told me that maybe we should consider Kickstarter. And at that point, we were already close to finishing the whole season. So we had a huge lead time already. So it worked to our advantage when we eventually decided to try Kickstarter. And that's how it went. It wasn't really planned or anything.
Well, it's been from an outsider, from a fan perspective, someone who backs some of your Kickstarters, it seems to be working out really well. I'm curious, now that have got some momentum going into it, is Miskatonic High, like, do you have plans to continue going with the series more in the future, or are you going to move on to something else?
Yeah. We plan on doing this as long as possible, actually. First, we wanted to do the whole season, and then we didn't really know if we had the budget to continue on. We still wanted to do season 2, but we were just running out of money. And luckily, when we got into Kickstarter, we managed to scrape up a few dollars to continue on, and the rest is history. So yeah, we plan to continue on as long as possible. We're targeting at least 25 issues, but who knows? We could go on as long as 100 issues. I mean, this seems like the new way to go for comics, actually.
Yeah, I agree. We're starting to see more series on Kickstarter that are staying on Kickstarter and getting up some issue numbers. I mean, with Crime Busters, I'm only working on issue 4 now, but I'm planning on going to issue 30. And Kickstarter's really been great for me on there. Now, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about your art and your background. Now, you live in the Philippines, that's right?
Yeah, Manila.
I'm curious about that because I know there's always been a big comic book art community from the Philippines.
Yeah.
particularly, you know, in the
Mhm.
in the 70s, there was all these great artists from the Philippines working at like DC and
Yeah.
Charlton. I'm a huge fan of Charlton,
Mhm.
so I've got a lot of Charlton comics with some great um, artists from the Philippines. I'm just curious, for those of us, you know, I'm here in America. I've never had a chance to visit the Philippines. What's the comic book sort of community and culture like there?
Well, it's tough to say how it is now because I don't really get in touch with the community. But I remember when I was young, we had a really thriving comic book industry here. That's how I got into comics. I mean, you can literally just find local comics everywhere, even in convenience stores, groceries, the wet market. They're just there hanging along with the newspapers. They were cheap. They were disposable, just like manga is for the Japanese, I guess. And you know the way comics was back in the 40s or 50s. And unfortunately, when the digital age came along, it started dwindling until finally it died down. And there are still some independent creators around here. And we all know that there are still some great artists working for Marvel and DC. But as much as a robust industry, it's almost non-existent, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too bad. I feel like there's been um, similar trend here in the U.S. It's just propped up a little by Marvel and DC, but things like
Yeah,
Kickstarter is what's so exciting. Is I love,
yeah,
you
it
know, I can
is.
go there, I can see all these books where it's just bypassed all of those things and coming right to us. So,
No,
um,
right.
and I'm curious, besides Miskatonic High, are there any other projects you're working on, or does that just take up all of your time these days?
It basically takes up my time, but I do work on other covers, just like I did with yours. I also work with this other group that we've been friends with for a long time, and they asked me to do a variant cover. I think that's coming out sometime this year. So yeah, I've been working on those and some commission works, but mostly it's just Miskatonic High.
And I'm curious, you know, when we started working on this, you know, I showed you some of the artwork from some of Jay's artwork and some of the basic stuff, and then um, you came back with a design that I thought was great. But I'm curious what your process is to come up with like the cover designs, not just for my book or Miskatonic High, if what your creative process is to design those great covers.
Well, usually I start with thumbnails. I like making small drawings just to get the idea out of my head because if I don't, I'll be thinking of it for the whole day or a week, and it just bothers me until I put it on the page, even though it's a little rough, and then I clean it up a bit, send it to whoever's asking me to make the cover, see if they like the idea, and then make changes if necessary. And I work mostly digital because my eyesight is so bad now. I wish I could work traditional. I mean, I started out that way, but it's just impossible now. I need to work digital. I need to zoom in on the page, and but basically, I still do same thing I do traditionally. I still use pencils, inks. The only difference is I'm working on a digital tablet. And then once that thumbnail is approved, I go back and clean it up more, do some layouts, rough pencils, and then it's just like a sculpture. You're building on the drawing bit by bit until you reach a point where you're happy with the pencils, and that's when I send it again to the client, and they tell me if it's good enough or still make changes. And then that's when I go in for the inks and colors.
Well, the coloring is always fascinating to me because I'm colorblind. So for me, it's really hard.
Are you?
Yeah, it's only certain shades, but you know, I've joked about this before, but it's 100% true. I have to have my wife come in and double check to make sure I haven't colored people green, because that does happen. If I'm trying to do like a Caucasian skin tone, I'll think I'm using like a pink shade, but it's actually green. And I've done lots of drawings with green people and not having any idea that I just did that. So that's one of the reasons that my comic, The Crime Buster, is in black and white, because it's just so hard for me to color. But with Uncle Sam, since I had Jay doing it, you know, he did all the art, all the coloring. So that was a huge help for me. I do have a question about what your creative process is with Miskatonic High, because one thing that Jay and I did with Uncle Sam that I think is a little unusual these days is we didn't work full script. We worked Marvel style. So I gave him just like a couple paragraph breakdown of each like 2-page spread, and just like, here's what happens. And then he basically worked out all the panel stuff, and I'm adding all the dialogue in afterwards. I'm only dialoguing it now that I have the completed art. So I didn't give him a script or anything. I'm curious how you and Mike do Miskatonic High.
We do full scripts. Actually, he sends me script, and I read it and tell him how I feel about the story, about the dialogue. I make suggestions. It's collaborative, actually. We work on the plot together sometimes. Sometimes he works on it on his own. If he gets stuck, he'd ask me for some help, and it's collaborative work. And then when I get the script, I do breakdowns of the pages. You know, I just make notes on the pages. It's page per page, panel for panel, and then I just make sure who the characters are in that particular panel, what the action is, the locations in each panel, just to make sure that when I go in to make the layouts, I know exactly where to place them, how many characters are supposed to be in a panel. It makes it a whole lot easier rather than going straight to penciling or layouts. So I make thumbnails of it. It's very rough. Basically, I'm the only one who can understand it. And then I build on, I make rough pencils from it. Afterwards, I also put in the dialogue balloons so that it has enough space, because usually our issues are full of dialogue. So I have to make sure it fits in the panel, and it doesn't, I don't end up making lots of backgrounds just to get covered by balloons. So I make sure it has enough space for that. So yeah, and see the flow of the characters. So if one character is talking from the left side, it has to flow along with the dialogue. So it takes a lot of thinking, and that's what comic craft is actually. It's during the layout period. That's when you make all the decisions for how the comics will look like in the end. So when I'm happy with that, go ahead and do the rest. And then pass it on to Mike after the pencils. He'll check with the script if he's happy with it. And if I made mistake, we don't have an editor, so we have to self-edit each other. I'm sure you know the experience with that.
Yeah, I do with Crime Busters. I do the whole thing myself. So I write and draw it and publish it, and doesn't really. I have a couple. My wife reads it, and I have a couple friends that read it and give me feedback.
Mhm.
But for the most part, it's just editing it myself and hoping I made the right decisions. Your insight there, it's great in terms of, you're absolutely right. When you're laying those panels out,
Mhm.
that's where you're basically creating the book.
Yeah.
And when I first started doing it, I actually didn't add the dialogue. I didn't even script my own stuff. And now I've started putting the word balloons in before I do the thumbnails.
Yeah.
Because I had too many times where I realized I had the people on the wrong side. This person had to speak first.
Right.
I had drawn them on the right instead of on the left. And so now I do all the dialoguing, and then I do the thumbnails to figure out. So it's much easier that way around. And it's been interesting.
Do you draw digitally?
I do everything digitally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I took a couple classes on comic art way back in the 90s. And at that time I was doing it. It was before digital. So I did everything traditional style then. But I find it much, much easier for me personally to work digitally. So it's just a lot faster for me personally to do it all digitally. So.
Yeah, and editing it is also more convenient than traditional.
Yeah, I make too many mistakes to do it traditionally. having the option to just click on a layer and make it disappear and get rid of all my mistakes immediately it's a lot better than accidentally inking over something and messing it up completely. So I know people that still work traditionally, but digitally for me it's just a lot easier. All right. Well, I really appreciate it. Again, I want to show everybody your book, Miskatonic High. Sorry, I only have issue 5 to show off, but trust me, there's several more issues coming to Kickstarter all the time. I was just, if you have anything you maybe want to say, about your comic, or just to anyone that might be watching.
Yeah, sure. If you guys are interested in reading Miskatonic High, we have it up on Kickstarter. We'll probably have another campaign around July or August, but we have links there to our website. So if you want to follow us and know when the next campaign will be, please check it out. And also, my variant cover for Scott and Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam. So yeah, look forward to that.
Yeah, it's great. I loved what you did there, and hopefully, everyone will check out Miskatonic High and they'll pick up your variant cover for Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam. So, all right, thanks very much. I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks, Scott. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ryan Mendoza as much as I did. Again, links down below to Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, so you can pick up either his Adventures into the Unknown variant or the Virgin variant without the logo. I'm also going to have the links to Miskatonic High down below, so if you want to check that out and see all the cool stuff that he's doing on that series, I encourage that because it's a great title. So thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all your support with the Kickstarter. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.